Tonight, as we continue our look at UFOs in Indiana,
lies within the boundaries of what's known as the Bermuda Triangle.
Medical experts say that in Miami, 10 crack babies are born every day.
In the 1980s, the style was crazy and so were the beliefs. We didn't have the luxury of the internet, and our information came by television, publications, or radio. And boy, oh boy, did some of these interactions get outrageous. This is Weird Things People Believed in the 1980s.
What did they say the devil would do to you?
They said that if we told that the devil...
Satanic panic. This speculation was one of the most bizarre and extreme preoccupations of society in the 80s, in what some might think to be the plot of the most graphic, blood-chilling horror movie ever. These were things a lot of ordinary people believed were happening in the neighborhoods in which they lived. It all begins with a few ambiguous whisperings and a number of yellow press articles proclaiming the existence of underground satanic cults performing rituals and kidnapping of children in terrible crimes. Concerns went on the rise when certain high-profile incidents came to public attention, and parents claimed that daycare providers were doing strange rituals while other parents feared there was a demon-worshipping network targeting their children. In their view, music, films, and sometimes even toys included satanic messages. Some people even believe that certain rock albums held satanic messages if played in reverse.
I want more chips! Here!
Video games cause violence. It may seem preposterous, but there was once a time when everyone thought that children were becoming violent delinquents as a result of playing video games. It wasn't the ruthless and violent ones that you think of today. It was those like Pac-Man and even Donkey Kong that caused a lot of concern. These games enjoyed so much popularity that children would spend hours in the arcades or at home on the screen. Pac-Man had you munching dots and dodging ghosts, while Donkey Kong was ducking barrels and saving a princess. They may be silly, but not everyone saw them that way. There were valid fears that the very actions performed in the course of the game and the competitive aspect were making children aggressive and even numbing them to violence.
The game is played in a group, and the guide, or dungeon master,
You enter...
Dungeons and Dragons linked to the occult. This fantasy role-playing game thrived in the 80s and gained most of its audience amongst geeky kids and teenagers who were fond of putting themselves into the world of sorcerers, knights, and dragons. To a number of people, including parents and religious sects, it appeared to be a hotbed of an entirely different nature, and much more sinister. People had all kinds of ideas saying that D&D was part of the occult. It said that those who played it became too immersed in the fantasy and could not distinguish it from real life. They became fixated on witches, magic, and Satanism.
The true nature of the Bermuda Triangle, the essence of its dark patterns, has never been revealed.
The Bermuda Triangle, a mysterious location in the Atlantic Ocean situated between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. This location raised suspicions amongst people because it was thought to be cursed. Many ships and planes were believed to have disappeared from sight without any explanation in this area. Various tales came out of the triangle in the 80s and captivated people. Television, print, and film made sure to advance the conspiracies, containing everything from aliens to time travel and even underwater societies. Most experts chalked it up to bad weather or even human error, and the Bermuda Triangle remains a fascination even today. It's just one of those things that's been labeled an unsolved mystery, and people are still trying to figure it out today.
In microwave radiation, dressed in protective clothing, his job...
Microwave radiation. The notion of cooking food in a matter of moments amazed people. However, many were worried about the dangers that the devices posed. One of the biggest concerns was that if you were in a confined space with a microwave, you were at risk of harmful exposure. Standing in front of the device was thought to cause radiation sickness and other health-related issues and even cancer. Mothers would caution children from sticking their faces on the glass while the food was being cooked. Some adults would not even allow the device in their homes. The idea of leaky microwaves was a source of anxiety for many.
Peanut butter cup. He was inspecting his 15-year-old son's Halloween candy last night.
Razor blades in Halloween candy. Parents from one end of the country to the other were concerned and convinced that maniacs were putting razor blades in Halloween treats. Most parents had to check each and every candy their kids brought home at Halloween and discard the homemade treats or anything that seemed the least bit out of place. The paranoia got so bad that some parents even tried to take candy to hospitals to have it x-rayed. Even today, parents will still examine their children's candy at Halloween because the fear is left over from the 80s. Pop rocks and soda explosion. In the 1980s, no children were safe from the urban legend that they risked enlargement or explosion in their stomach if they ate Pop Rocks followed by a soda. Pop Rocks were a candy when once inserted into the mouth, they caused a crackling and popping thanks to the carbon dioxide in the candy. It was believed that mixing it with soda in the stomach would cause a lot of gas and the person would explode. The story gained greater popularity when a rumor was started that a child actor in an advertisement, who was mostly referred to as Mikey in Life cereal commercials, had died while attempting that experiment. The ozone layer would disappear completely. This one may be rooted in some kind of truth, but it was overhyped in the 80s. The ozone layer, which protects the sun's ultraviolet radiation, was diminishing because of a class of chemicals, and these were contained in spray cans, cooling gas, amongst others, known as aerosols. It became a global concern to the environment over the threat of what would happen if the ozone layer actually disappeared. People visualized it melting anyone who didn't have cover, getting burnt within a few minutes or hours, and developing cancer almost instantly. While ozone depletion was and still is a serious issue, efforts like the Montreal Protocol have helped to reduce the use of CFCs, and the ozone layer has been slowly recovering. In the 80s, it felt almost like we were standing at the apocalyptic edge of an endless sun.
Acid rain falls in the northeastern United States and eastern Canada. It is made up of
acid rain. From the vantage point of the 1980s, you could observe there were growing concerns about environmental issues, and among them, acid rain was one of the biggest. Acid rain is the contamination of rain with hydrochloric, nitric, or sulfuric acid, and these components are released into the atmosphere from industrial processes, motor vehicles, and electric power generation. It's then drawn into water vapor and comes back down to the ground as acid rain. While it was a big concern to those who lived in urban areas, it also exaggerated panic. Fears of deforestation, famine of crops, and poisonous waters where fish wouldn't survive were real, and they even imagined an acid-like precipitation could erase the city skyline as the buildings and statues would degrade and disintegrate with every downpour. The Y2K Fear. This one wasn't fully realized until the late 1990s, but began brewing in the 80s when people started realizing a huge problem with computers. It wasn't unusual for computer systems to store the year in 2 digits, and so 1999 was recorded as 99. Almost at the turn of the centuries, concerns began to rise that they would turn to 00 and computers couldn't cope. It was feared that systems would default to the year 1900, and then that led to worldwide system breakdown. People thought that banking systems would be paralyzed, electricity supply would give in, and planes would crash all over the place, and society as it was known would be no more the moment it turned to the year 2000.
Indianapolis. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect an alien spacecraft to land.
Alien abduction. The 1980s were an exhilarating time for crazy stories and a high rise in the accounts of unidentified flying objects. And with that came the threat of alien abduction. These incidents were often dramatized in a way involving stories of people boarding spaceships where they were operated on by aliens and then returned with no recollection of the event. Some even insisted that they spotted lights in the firmament or met creatures having big eyes and little green or gray bodies. This is a belief that still holds on even to this day. AIDS could be spread through casual contact. AIDS is a disease that is caused by the HIV virus, but in the early days, very little was known about how it was spread. People held the view that merely touching an infected individual, passing on a soft drink, using the same bathroom, or walking into the same space would cause them to contract the virus. Many places would send people away who had HIV, and the public had a tendency to ostracize them. In some cases, erroneous beliefs led to the expulsion of families from their towns or the refusal of health treatment in hospitals. It would not be known until later that this was actually transmitted through certain bodily fluids and not normal day-to-day social contact. Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster are real. An explosion in the belief of Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster took place in the 80s, and people started to believe that Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster were real. Some believe that Bigfoot was some kind of psychic and clever animal that could have once roamed the earth with dinosaurs but had somehow survived. Expeditions were mounted and thousands of man-hours were spent by believers looking for footprints and shedding hair and other evidence. At the same time, there was a national obsession devoted to a creature named the Loch Ness Monster. The legend that hundreds of Loch Ness Monster sightings had been reported in a deep lake in Scotland, and like many other things in the 80s, low-grade blurry pictures of Nessie became prevalent. Some would suggest the Loch Ness Monster was a living dinosaur, while others considered it represented a different species of animal. Year after year, exhaustive searches, including scans of the lake, have proved conclusively that the Loch Ness Monster does not exist. Cell phones would fry your brain. In the 1980s, cellular phones were bulky and heavy compared to sophisticated ones that we have today. Individuals found the ability to make a phone call wherever they wanted very appealing, and with that appeal came some apprehension. People generally tended to think that these first handsets had high levels of radiation that would cook your brain. There was a notion suggesting that since the phone was used close to the head, the destructive radiation emitted by the phone would tear brain tissues and cause headaches and disabilities and cancers. Even though there was no scientific evidence to back it up, the attitude continued, and people restricted their use of mobile phones and avoided setting it close to their head. Even legitimate news stations ran programs including content warnings against the use of the phones due to their radiation and health issues.
Officials began testing Tylenol samples at random from area stores, but could find no additional traces of poison.
Tampered Tylenol. The tampered Tylenol scare began with a poisoning case in 1982, which concerned the entire country. After consuming Tylenol that were known to be injected with cyanide, several people died in Chicago. A person had spoiled the product, injecting the toxic substance into the already sealed capsules on the shelves. This was followed by a nationwide recall, creating chaos, and almost overnight, people became cautious about all the medicines that could be bought without a prescription. There were claims about other pharmacy drugs being contaminated, which harmed the general population's sense of security. Even for a period, some people managed to refrain from purchasing or even consuming any kinds of relief medication, and the panic altered the structuring of goods. It restricted the use of polycarbonate packs with content-locking mechanisms and enforced design changes for most brands. Very few incidents of actual poisoning occurred, and the scare altered the way that people bought and trusted medicine.
A pregnant woman smokes crack cocaine. Her intense high lasts only a few seconds, but it can leave her unborn child with a lifetime of trouble.
Crack babies. In the aftermath of the crack cocaine epidemic that swept through cities in the mid to late 80s, media coverage took a turn when it began to focus on babies who were said to have been born from mothers on crack. Referred to as crack babies, it was widely assumed they would be developmentally impaired and suffer from mental and physical disabilities and behavioral problems. At that time, politicians and experts predicted that these children would turn out to be an extra burden to society, as they would be incapable of normal functioning and most likely engage in criminal activities and be poor. Elvis Presley is still alive. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, died in the year 1977, but in the 80s several people were adamant that his death was a hoax, believing that he was still alive in secret. Conspiracy theories began to say that people were spotting him in every corner of the world. The motivations that fueled these theories would differ. Some people speculated that Elvis had staged his death to get away from fame and lead a more peaceful existence, while others thought he simply had enemies and there were dark reasons behind the scenes or a secret agent. Sensationalist tabloids embraced the rumors, complete with sightings of Elvis that corresponded to evidence, and there were theories suggesting that he had embedded messages in his songs or letters announcing his execution by fake death.
If you have trouble programming your VCR, may we suggest a Panasonic? You see, you can program one straight out of the box.
VCRs would destroy the movie industry. In the early 80s, VCRs were introduced to the public and became an essential item in numerous homes. People had the chance to tape their favorite shows, rent films, and view everything in the comfort of their living room. Studios became concerned that home video would discourage going to the theater because people could easily record and view any film from the comfort of their house. For them, it was an all doom and gloom situation, and VCRs meant the end of the industry. Studios protested against VCRs, stating that they would be the death sentence for films, and as we know, that never came true. The Cold War would end in nuclear annihilation. In the 1980s, the Cold War reached its peak between the US and the Soviet Union, and the threat of a nuclear war was omnipresent in people's lives. And there was a heavy threat of mutually assured destruction. Both countries were making so many bombs they could have easily destroyed multiple planets, and thus any war would mean an all-out annihilation. Schools were conducting duck and cover drills with children, where students were instructed to get under their desk in the event of a nuclear blast, as if that would provide any substantial protection. The Illuminati controlled everything. The concept of the Illuminati, a cryptic cabal of powerful figures who controlled everything from the shadows, was not a new one, but it found a thrust of popularity in the 80s. Conspiracy theorists alleged that they put political organizations in motion and directed every single government, bank, media, and even the best pop culture in their line to keep these forces in check. The theory was that a few movers could include high-ranking politicians, executive officers, and actors, amongst others that sought to establish a new world order, whereby they would have absolute rule over the people of Earth. People literally began to look for and find hidden messages and ideologies in symbols, the dollar sign, for example, as some company insignias, and music video clips, and when they thought that they'd found them, they believed it was the work of the Illuminati. Which of these beliefs from the 1980s do you know of and have heard before? And if you like this video, you'll want to see this one about forgotten barbecue foods your grandma always had on the table. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss another memory in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.